Hey guys, what's going on? So today I'm excited because today I'm going to be talking about my new boots here. These are my Grant Stone Ottawa boots in bourbon suede. Now I got to start out by saying that this is a pair of boots that I've been looking at for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. I fell in love with this style because I saw a few of the people that I follow on Instagram. They got this makeup from Grant Stone, and I believe the original run was not like an open order. I think it was an exclusive. I think you had to reply to an email, tell them that you're interested and do a pre-order. I'm pretty sure that's how it worked the first time around. I might be wrong. I definitely didn't get a chance to hop on these the first time. So I'm really happy that I finally got these because the first time I saw them, I said, wow, that's just a perfect makeup. That suede against that sole with the hand stitching mock toe. Just a beautiful pair of boots. Because I am a fan of the indie boot, and these to me screamed, these are like the essence of indie boots right here. So that's why I wanted these. And so I've had them in the back of my mind literally since the first time I saw these on Instagram. And then what ended up happening, actually, I fell into turmoil for a minute there because the week that these snuff suede indie boots arrived, these Grant Stones popped up on their site. They were available for everybody. And I said, oh, great, you know, that's literally my luck, because I was holding out for these. I found a pair of snuff suede indies. Well, it turns out that these ended up dropping on their website. I was having a real conundrum there for a minute because my problem was I was kind of thinking of these as the same makeup. I was so concerned about this that I reached out to several of the people that I follow on Instagram who own both. A lot of guys that I follow own both the snuff suede indie boot and the bourbon suede Ottawa boot from Grant Stone. And so I messaged a few guys, and they all gave me their input because I was just so on the fence. I'm like, is this little strip enough to justify getting a whole other pair of boots? Because basically I thought that these suedes were the same, but I'll get to that in a second. But anyways, the sole's different too. Obviously, we got commando sole here on the Aldens, and we got leather soles on the Grant Stones. Once they arrived and I saw them in person, I was instantly relieved when I saw them because they look nothing like the snuff suede indies. If you're really into boots, then you'll know that it comes down to very fine, minute details, and it turns out that these Ottawa boots are not snuff suede. These Ottawa boots are bourbon suede. So the snuff suede that Alden uses, it's a different shade of brown compared to the bourbon suede here. For a while there, I was thinking that these were snuff suede, but it's not. And actually, once I got these, I immediately recognized this type of suede. I don't know if you guys watched this video, but these are I did a video on these probably about a year ago. These are my Ludlow boots from J. Crew. These are J. Crew brand Goodyear welted boots, cap toe, very beautiful boot. We got a Vibram sole that's similar to a Dynite sole there. And I threw on these tan rawhide laces to accentuate the look. But basically, these suedes are, by my eye, identical. They look like the same exact shade of brown. And this suede is not snuff suede. This suede is like a medium brown suede, whereas a snuff suede, I would characterize snuff suede as a medium light. This is more of a medium brown, and then you get into more like the chocolate suedes, that's getting a lot more like chocolate brown. But anyways, what I'm getting at here is I was really happy when they arrived because it reaffirmed the idea in my head that yes, I could fit both the snuff suede indie boot and the bourbon suede Ottawa boot into my rotation. I can justify it. They're not close enough. Not to mention, upon getting these, I noticed that there's some other details that I didn't take into consideration beforehand, such as you can see on the Grant Stone Ottawa boots here, you have, well, I call it a heel cap. I don't know what it's really called, but it's a cap here on the heel, and then you got this little strip here, heel strip. And so the heel cap obviously is not on the indie boot. The indie boot just has the heel strip. That's different in the design as well. So, and I've said this before, the Grant Stones are just probably a hair taller than the Aldens. Another thing that distinguishes these from each other is on the Grant Stones we have unfinished edging here. Compared to the Aldens, the edges here are finished. I do think that Aldens are just slightly dressier, and the reason I say that is because of the eyelets. The eyelets are more narrow, and they accommodate a much more narrow lace, and so what that means is it just gives it a sleeker, more dressy look, whereas compared to the Grant Stone, you got the rawhide laces, you have the wider eyelets here, which allow you to throw in some thick rawhide leather laces in there and give it a more badass, more manly look. And so that's what I really like about Grant Stones. It takes the best of Alden's sleek silhouette and design, And it takes what I like about Viberg and Truman and the other really solid boot brands that I love, it takes their wide eyelets. So it's basically an Alden with wide eyelets. So that's what I really like about these Grantstone Ottawa boots here. Not to mention, I mean, workmanship around the Goodyear welt here is just utterly flawless, and that it's like that on all of my Grantstone Ottawa boots. I get a lot of DMs on Instagram, and a lot of guys, they're sort of, you know, with Grantstone, the big thing with Grantstone is that they're made in China. Oh, well, since they're made in China, does that mean that the workmanship is lackluster in any way? No. Every single pair of Grantstones that I've ever got were just flawless. The only pair that had some little abrasions in the leather were, I knew that going into it, were my ivory suede plain toe bluchers from Grantstone, because those were B grade. Anyways, those were secondhand. I bought them from the site at a deep discount, so I knew that going into it. But no, and even that pair, there's nothing wrong with it in terms of construction. And once again, like this pair, you could look it up and down, you won't find a single flaw. I mean, you could tell they're handmade, but the design and the execution on the construction is not lackluster in any way. I mean, these are top-notch boots, and I can't stress that enough. A lot of guys, like I said, they DM me and they come to me with any concerns because they're used to collecting Alden, and I tell them, you know, immediately, like, no, these are pretty perfect boots. I mean, the QC on them is exceptional. The customer service is exceptional. I really like Grantstone. I really like the brand and the personalities behind the brand, their willingness to communicate with you. They're so responsive. You could DM them directly, they'll answer your questions. In fact, I'm really excited because Grantstone is doing an Ottawa boot makeup here in the near future for some natural shell cordovan. I told them once they do that run, I'm going to put my name in for this, because that is just a beautiful makeup. And I'll be more than excited to be able to get my hands on a new pair of rare shell cordovan boots. If you're hesitant because they're made in China, I'll tell you right now, to me, that is not a deterrent in the least. Not to mention, this kind of is a segue that's going to lead me into my next point. The next thing that I want to talk about is my one buddy on Instagram, Stitchdown. If you haven't heard of him, I'm gonna include a link to his website and a link to the article that I'm about to reference, because Stitchdown did an interview with Wyatt, the founder of Grantstone. And Wyatt is very open and proud by the fact that he manufactures his boots in China, because here's the thing. Grantstone is still an American boot brand. It's just that they outsource their production to China. And I know that that gets controversial sometimes, but Stitchdown interviewed Wyatt, and Wyatt is very open about it, and he hears the controversy and all this, but he's damn proud of his brand, and the more we get into it, the deeper we go. This is something that I didn't realize until fairly recently, is Wyatt's grandfather worked for Alden for a long time. Named after a legendary Alden salesman whose Manhattan accounts Wyatt's grandfather took over when he retired. A perfect gentleman who never swore in his life, and would never ever call on an account without a jacket or a tie. Grantstone emerged on the Goodyear welt footwear scene about 3 years ago with a very attractive small range of long wings and plain toe bluchers, before moving to loafers, boots, and more. And some criticism, and this is what I'm talking about. Those shots fired largely tread on two themes. The Grantstone shoes were made in China, and that they looked, well, a bit like the shoes made by a certain Massachusetts company that once employed a perfect gentleman salesman named Grantstone. 3 years later, Grantstone has produced the type of shoes and boots that put those questions largely to rest, while offering one of the more competitive price points in the entire space. Wyatt also brings a very refreshing perspective to the table. He's the farthest thing from a marketer. He very openly speaks the truth to the industry, its products, and the compromises any brand has had to make, including his own, like few others. We spoke at length about his approach to developing and manufacturing his shoes, how they're different, in fact, from Alden's, despite referencing them at times, his very unique thoughts on the direct-to-consumer business model, and how he's done something few have, that many once thought to be crazy. Made an incredibly high-quality shoe in China. Grantstone founder Wyatt Gilmore makes great shoes in China, and he's damn proud of it. He's a young guy, he's a young entrepreneur. So Stitchdown says, your grandfather worked as a salesman at Alden for a ridiculous 60 years. Your dad worked there as well, and then came over to China to make Goodyear welted shoes. What was it like growing up in a shoe family? So Wyatt responded, my dad first moved to Michigan, where I grew up, when he was a salesman for the Alden Midwest Territory. But by the time I was growing up, he was already in China. I wanted to say he started acting as an agent for the factory there, the same one that makes Grantstone shoes today, in 1994. But honestly, I didn't really understand it all until I was a teenager. I almost know more about what my grandpa did because he absolutely loves to talk about his work. When I was younger, I started racing motocross, and that's pretty much what I did every weekend. When I was 15, I was homeschooled so I could move down south and be at the training facility. So I really didn't have any exposure to the shoe business when it came to the details until I made the decision to visit the factory and went over to China in 2010. Stitchdown asked, what made you decide to do that? Wyatt said, I was trying to do motocross as a career, but I had a lot of injuries, and more importantly, I wasn't going to cut it. Like any sport, you have to be at the very top to consider doing it long term as a career. So I stopped racing when I was 19, and it was either go to school, get a job, or do something else. Basically what happened is Wyatt ended up moving to China just to get some exposure to something different than what he was used to. He said that he would just go over there for a month to open your eyes a bit. Maybe you could work with the factory. So I went and was living with the owner, and after a month the owner said, well, actually, if you want to stick around, I think maybe you can help us. Wyatt said he just liked it. He liked working in the factory, and he liked learning the language. You can go there yourself and read the interview. It's very good. Like I said, I think it's good to go to the source. I think it's better to listen to the founder himself. He fills a niche in the boot market, and I really like the boot makeups that Grant Stone's coming out with. They just recently came out with some blue suede Ottawa boots, and I immediately went onto the site to see if they had my size, and that was the one size that was already sold out. So I was a little disappointed in that, but do I really need a new pair of boots, you know? So this was a point that Wyatt made throughout the article, throughout the interview, that I really found very fascinating. He emphasized the fact that he says, if we have a sale, we will definitely sell a lot of shoes, but where does it end? And I'm sure if we put pigskin lining or maybe change out our insole and everything else and dropped our price $50 retail, we know we would sell more shoes, but where does that lead long term? My grandpa, he loves his company being Alden, and he called it his company. He loved what they did so much that it was very, very clear. Price? Put that on the back burner. You just make the best shoes you can make, he'd say. The best fit, the best out there, and that's how you sell a lot of shoes and have a good business. He didn't care about anything else, and he was so confident in that message. And that's what I really believe Grant Stone lives up to. His grandpa said for all these years, Alden makes the best shoes. They're not copping out. You're not going to get shoes next year with a lining that's less expensive or something like that. It's just not going to happen. That's just not the way we run our business. And so without a doubt, that mentality is what drives us at Grant Stone as well. Just make the product how you want to make it. And there are plenty of people that will buy it. Maybe our image doesn't fit for some people, and we could do better marketing and this and that. But generally, if you actually mean what you say and people look into it and see that you're trying to make the best product you can, there will be people that are interested. You can always make something less expensive. It's very, very easy to do. It might actually be the easiest thing to do. But then what? And so a company like Alden or Viberg, they're not apologizing for anything. They're making what they can make, and people love that. He articulated that very well there. And yes, I get this question sometimes. It's like, okay, so because these are made in China, the assumption is, well, do they use cheaper materials? The answer to that is no. No, these are top-notch materials in every single way. They're not cutting corners, like he says in the article. And I completely agree. These are just as tough as Alden's, just as tough as Viberg's. And people absolutely love that these brands are just unabashedly going for the best materials. They're making the absolute best product that they possibly can. Cost is the secondary factor in the equation, and I agree with that. That's what Grant Stone's about. Cost is something that you consider after the fact that you've produced the best possible thing that you can. There are a lot of Alden connections through your family, so some people say that some of your shoes look an awful lot like Alden's. How intentional is that? Stitchdown asked, and Wyatt said, well, the reality is they definitely do. The plain-toe blucher and the long wing, they're pretty similar. But what happens when any Goodyear Welt brand comes out with a long wing? The Florsheim, which is very similar to the Alden long wing, it's not very difficult to copy a pattern, but while they're similar, ours is actually nothing like theirs if you get down to the details. And yes, I do agree with that. When you really look at the fine details, they're actually quite different in a lot of ways. Wyatt expands on that. He says, for example, the perfs on ours are bigger, the perforations on the long wing bluchers, the little holes. And it's just a little bit more bulbous towards the toe. And some people, they won't like that. Ours definitely looks almost more like an English style vamp. That's what I like about it personally. The proportions have to make sense. Alright, so this portion of the interview is interesting because it gets into talking about the Leo last. And I've been saying this for a long time. Ever since I tried the Leo last at first, I was blown away by how comfortable it is. It's definitely one of my favorite lasts. It is so comfortable. And so Stitchdown says on the last side of things, The bulk of your shoes are on your Leo last, your first. How would you describe that last? And why it says, you know, that's a tough one to answer because I think it's very personal. Lasts are very style driven. The Leo last is a classic American English brogue shape. And while it has something of an almond shape, it's more on the bulbous side of things. I think it's a style. In general, it is very full, and for some guys, they don't like it. I would say, though, that if you like Alden True Balance and Alden Berry Last, the Leo Last is an excellent last. He says, the reality is it fits a lot of people who are D, E, and then triple E in this last. It's huge, and I say that in a good sense. It's very full. We've had so many people who have a hard time getting into an E width. They have very high insteps, really wide feet. The Leo Last fits a lot of people, and it's very comfortable. If I'm traveling, I love taking a pair. And a lot of people like the way it looks. Yes, that's when I first noticed that I was in love with the Leo Last, was when I was packing for a trip that I was about to take. I was going to fly somewhere, I forget, and I didn't have a lot of time to pack, and instinctually I just grabbed my Grant Stone diesel boots in Natural Chrome Excel. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be on an airplane, it's going to be cramped, I want to be as comfortable as I can in my boots because I'm very conscious of my circulation, and I instinctually I grab my Grant Stones. I'm like, yeah, these are some of the most comfortable boots that I own. He says people are often wearing shoes that are too narrow. Yes, and that was me most of my life. I didn't understand why most of my life I had the inclination to kick off my shoes while I was at my desk or something like that, and I think it was because I was buying the wrong size. I was sizing down too small. It was cutting off circulation, and as your foot swells, blood has a harder time getting through the veins in your foot. I mean, it makes sense, but at the time I wasn't thinking like that. I was just thinking, oh God, these shoes, I gotta kick them off. And so I was kicking them off, but ever since I discovered the size that really works for me, which is 8.5 Alden True Balance, 8.5 Leo Last Grant Stone. These are boots that no matter how much my blood pressure goes up, these boots are still comfortable. So I agree with him. People wear shoes that are just too small. I've said this before, I'm very particular with how I size because I like a generous fit. I do not like to feel constricted or suffocated in any way, especially in my boots. It's one thing to wear like a form-fitting shirt or maybe some form-fitting pants, but it's a completely other thing for me to deal with tight-fitting shoes. I cannot stand them. It says we have a pretty solid customer return rate. A heavy portion of that is due to the last fitting. Yes, that's what brought me back. Talks about their new cap toes, which are very attractive looking cap toes. I was thinking about getting the tan pair. That's a beautiful boot. And I'm very excited about this. Wyatt brings up that they're sampling some interesting kudu, like a light gray kudu with dark scarring throughout. Grant Stone posted this on their Instagram recently. I put a message in. If you're gonna do this makeup, I'm already in. I'm definitely interested in that pair. It's a pretty cool article paired with a natural welt and a natural midsole. Of course, it's not going to be a core seller for us, but something more fun. Hell yeah, that's a fun pair. So yeah, I will leave a link in the description below to that article so you could go check it out. Stitchdown does some awesome reviews with some of these boot companies, and I highly suggest reading them. He not only does that, but he interviews other prominent Instagrammers and things like that. He's really involved in the community. You should really check out Stitchdown's website because he's really doing some deep dives and some deep research into the industry, and I think it's fascinating to go through and read every one of his articles, because if you're into this stuff, if you're looking at my channel and you're interested in this stuff, go check out Stitchdown because he has some incredible stuff, some incredible interviews with some incredible boot makers. I think that's gonna about sum it up for me. I am very happy with this pair of Bourbon suede Ottawa boots. And I know that some of the guys that I follow and some of the guys that follow me on Instagram, they've got some Bourbon suede and they're just blown away by them. In some cases, it was their first pair. They're so happy with them. They're so attractive and such a good price point for something of this quality, and I fully agree. I've been preaching Grant Stone for a couple years now. I'm just in love with the boots, and this definitely won't be my last pair. Even though I keep saying that I'm done buying boots, it's not true, it's never true. So anyways, that's gonna sum it up for me. I'm on Instagram. If you wanna check me out there, I will be posting pictures of these as they continue to age and break in. So anyways, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.